we'll be taking up the theme of communication, and generally we don't associate the theme of communication with spirituality, and yet in fact, if you look at this word communication and you see how it breaks down, from communication we can come to the word communion, and then from communion we come to the word union, and union is actually one of the translations for a very ancient term called yoga. Yoga has been interpreted in many different ways, but yoga actually means the union of the self with the supreme. Again, in terms of communication, normally we would think that what we have to do is to understand human personalities and understand about the vertical and the horizontal relationships that come in within human energies. But yet, if we first of all pay attention to one particular aspect of communication, communion and union, that is of the self with the supreme, then my own experience has been that it's then possible to sort out all the levels of communication with others. Because first and foremost, communication has to take place in a very easy and natural way with the self. Do I know myself? How much time do I spend with myself? If I can't communicate with myself and I'm not able to communicate with the Supreme, what is going to be the possibility of communicating with others of a variety of different personalities? Who is it that you spend time with? How is it that you're able to get to know somebody? If you spend time with someone, then there's a good possibility that you can get to know them. And once you get to know somebody, there's also the hope and the possibility that you'll get to like them, that maybe you'll even get to appreciate them and love and respect them. If I haven't spent time with myself, to what extent have I been able to know myself, like myself, have love and respect for myself? And if this is lacking in terms of my own inner communication, is it going to be possible for me to be able to have communication with you in which there's a natural love and respect for you also? Little wonder that the paradox of the present modern times is that we can dial 10 digits, 10 buttons, and reach London or New York, and yet sometimes there are so many walls between myself and the people I live with on a day-to-day basis that we really don't know what's going on in the other's mind. And even when they spend time with us and speak to us, we still wonder, what is it that's really going on in their hearts, and what is it that they're able to express in words to us? And so it seems that communication is one of the paradoxes of today. It seems that if we can sort out our own inner communication with the self, at the point where I stop being a stranger to myself and I start becoming a friend to myself, from that moment on, my communication with you and all others around me becomes very easy and natural. It isn't just a question of turning inwards in order to be able to know the self. There's also a cleansing process that's involved. If you try looking into a mirror that's filled with much grime and dust, how much can you see? In the same way, perhaps in the first instance, even if I give myself time and I start looking inwards, I don't really find a great deal that is very interesting, because I'm hidden even from myself. There are so many layers of dust and grime that I don't actually know myself. Or perhaps at the point where I look inwards, then what I see is not so very pleasant, and so I don't want to spend too much time with myself. Sometimes we look into our own minds, and what we're seeing are all sorts of painful memories. The things of sorrow from the past have been etched very deeply into our consciousness, and any moment that we have an opportunity, when we give ourselves space from all the external things of the world, looking inwards actually just arises all those memories. It emerges all those things that I'm trying to forget. And so then, I don't want to spend time in silence, in communication with myself. This is why there's another very important ingredient in terms of communication, and that is to be able to experience a link with the Supreme, because it is that link that gives me the strength, the purity, and my own love for the self and respect for the self. It's God's love and God's power that allows this mirror to become clean. And then when I look into that mirror of my own mind, I see things of truth, I see things of beauty, and I begin to actually appreciate and value myself. And then it's possible to experience a sweet communication with myself, one in which I'm able to love myself and respect myself. Again, one of the paradoxes of communication is that communication isn't actually happening only in terms of sound and words. Communication is actually also happening through silence. When you hear music, part of the beauty of the music is not just the sound that's generated, but the pauses, the interval in between the notes. That also is part of the beauty of the harmony of music. In the same way, learning to communicate with myself, I begin to make use of silence. Instead of letting the mind simply just chatter and move around constantly, let the thoughts emerge, but then let there be a pause, a moment of silence, a time in which I can reflect. I can look inwards and appreciate the beauty of the eternal spirit, of the eternal self. If I develop the practice of doing this, I begin to deal with all the painful memories of the past, so that I've finished them, I've let go of them, I've left them behind. Then I can move on. If I keep allowing those memories to come back again and again, then it's simply wounds that just arise and don't heal, and it still causes me pain even at this point of time, even though it was something that happened years ago. And so I begin to experiment. Instead of letting those thoughts come, in the presence of God, experiencing God's love, I allow God's love to allow that which is the highest and the best within myself to begin to blossom. And as it opens up and as it emerges, I begin to actually enjoy the silence. Communication with myself begins to be a very lovely experience. And as I develop this ability to communicate with myself and know myself not only on a superficial level, but on a very innermost, deep level, at that point, I'm able to start the communication with the Supreme in a meaningful way. In the first instance, I'm simply taking His help. In God's presence, I'm allowing God's love to reach me and give me strength and purity. But at a point where I've begun to appreciate silence, I'm then able to start an active relationship with God. Have you ever thought that it was possible to communicate with the Supreme? Why not? Surely it is our birthright to be able to do this. We've been remembering God as the parent, as the teacher, as the friend, as the beloved, and yet we haven't actually developed a living relationship with the Supreme. And this is why these terms only remain words, and they don't have an impact on our life. But if I choose, then I can develop all these relationships with the Supreme by communication. I, the soul, in this awareness of the being of light, visualize the Supreme Being, also a being of light, and with the power of my mind, I focus my thoughts on the Supreme, and I begin this communication. But I also allow my mind to become still, because it is in that stillness that God's qualities can reach me. My thoughts reach God, that's a certainty. But then the proof of this is that God's vibrations also reach me. And I feel God's love, protection, blessings, and constant support. If this is my experience, then in my outreach to the world, it becomes a very natural and simple way to be able to communicate. Because in my communication then, firstly, there is clarity. My mind is clear. My heart is clean. There are no hidden motives. There are no ulterior motives. And so my outreach to another human being is a very genuine one, in which all I'm seeking is a communication, a connection. I'm not demanding anything from them. I'm not expecting them to solve my problems for me. I'm not expecting them to fulfill any hidden desires that I have. It's a very, very simple communication in which I'm totally open and able to share something of value. There's a very little equation that's worth keeping in mind. It's something that we tend to forget. When we communicate with others, there are various factors that come in. Either there's an image of them that I carry in my mind, whether it's real or not is another factor, but there's a certain impression, a certain image that I carry, and I tend to project this image onto them. And so whatever they say, whatever they do, is then filtered through this particular projection. Or secondly, it's my expectations and desires that come in the way. I want something from them. I'm hoping for something. And it's in this little factor that this equation applies. Sometimes we think that if you multiply half by half, what will it make? I am not a complete person. Instead of being whole, if I'm really honest and look inwards, I find that instead of being whole, there's little gaps within my own personality. And I come across another individual, and I would like to have very deep connection, communication, relationship with them, thinking that they'll provide the missing ingredients within my own personality, and the two of us coming together, we'll be able to complete each other and make each other whole. Except that if you multiply half by another half, you don't get one. Instead, you get a quarter. Because the reality is that I come with my weaknesses and imperfections, you come with yours, and instead of actually being able to help and complement each other, generally the situation is that there's a clash and conflict. Maybe it isn't visible in the first instance. Maybe it takes a few weeks, a few months, a few years, but at a certain point of time, it becomes very clear that instead of actually being able to help each other, we're actually depleting each other's strength and energy, because our expectation was to be able to fulfill each other, and half can't complete the other half. What needs to happen is that I, in that realization of my own weaknesses, need to turn to the source, to the Supreme, so that from the unlimited ocean I'm able to draw all that I need to be able to complement all the things that are missing within myself, so that I become a complete whole personality with all factors in balance with each other. If I can do this, then not just in relationship with one individual, but in relationship with many individuals, with a group of individuals, with a community, whatever it may be. Yet what then happens is that because I know that my source of fulfillment is the one, then in my communication with others, there is no expectation. Rather, if there can be something of benefit that can be shared, it becomes very possible to do that, and I'm able to give, I'm able to share, but I'm not expecting anything in return. Communication then becomes a very sweet connection. If I've been able to realize my own value and have esteem for myself, recognizing my own eternal state, then in that state of self-respect and love for the self, I can share that with you also. Otherwise, the situation is that if I don't recognize myself, I haven't spent time with myself, I don't value myself, then it means that I'm demanding support from you because I have this feeling of inferiority. And in that state of inferiority, I need your support to enable me to stand. Or sometimes it works the other way also. It's not just inferiority complexes that we go through, but every coin has two sides, and the two sides perhaps seem to be completely contradictory. And in terms of this, one side of the coin is the inferiority complex, and the other side of the same coin is a superiority complex. And so, because I lack self-esteem, I want to prove myself. I have to have that force and authority and bossiness in which I demonstrate how powerful I am. But in fact, the seed of that is also lack of self-esteem. And so coming back to that awareness of my own true identity and recognizing my eternal value without any external factor of position or possessions or fortune, in that state of awareness, I'm able to be independent. I'm able to be free. I can stand alone with support from one, with strength from one. It means you don't need to support me, and I don't need to be bossy over you. I can be friends with you. we can work together. You can see how, on an inner level, bringing about this change with the help of yoga, the union with one, the connection with one, this communication, it's then possible to put right communication with all others. In terms of this question of the images that I project, again, it's actually the same process of inner silence and inner awareness. Because in this awareness, I see myself as that point of light, that being of light. When I look at you, I don't see your physical form. I don't even see the mood that you happen to be in. I focus my attention on that shining star in the center of your forehead, that jewel of eternal truth and beauty, and there's no other projections, there's no barriers or walls that come in the way. I then communicate not only through words with you, but my attitude of soul consciousness, my vibrations of spiritual awareness, and my vision of the eternal soul then changes the quality of communication. Then we need to use very few words. We can use the power of silence to be able to know each other and understand each other. If this inner connection isn't right, then we use many words, but even the many words just cause further debate and difficulty. They don't actually clarify things, but with that inner silence, communication becomes very simple. Let's practice this art of yoga, union, communion, communication with the Self and the Supreme for a few moments. I turn my attention inwards. I visualize myself as a being of light. I am that point of eternal light in the center of the forehead. I see my own original state. In my original state, there is truth, there is beauty, and in this awareness, in the presence of the Supreme, my own inner strength grows. I can feel the light of the soul becoming brighter, shining, radiant. In this awareness, I look out into the world and I see the shining stars, the eternal lights. I see the souls. And I send out rays of peace and love. I come back to the consciousness of my physical surroundings, but now I keep this consciousness so that it influences my communication with all others.
Oh.